I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. It was an ordinary day like any other. Emile Trudeau, 42, had just returned from his usual Saturday morning routine, a trip to the farmer's market followed by a brisk walk around Montreal's Parc La Fontaine. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, much different from the whirlwind of chaos it had once been. His son, Louis, now 18, was away at university studying mechanical engineering, a far cry from the broken, confused child Emile had comforted through countless sleepless nights. The memories of those darker days occasionally surfaced, but Emile had long since learned how to keep them at bay. That is, until the doorbell rang. At first, Emile thought nothing of it. The postman, perhaps. A delivery he'd forgotten about. He wiped his hands on a kitchen towel, shaking off the water from washing dishes, and headed toward the front door. But as soon as he opened it, his heart stopped. Standing there, framed by the cool September air, was Marguerite Tremblay. Marguerite, the woman who had once been his wife. The woman who had shattered their family a decade ago. The woman who had vanished from their lives without a word, leaving Emile to pick up the pieces of their broken home. And she wasn't alone. A little girl, no older than 5 or 6, clung to her side. Marguerite's face, once radiant with youth and confidence, looked older, more tired. Her once well-kept auburn hair now had streaks of gray, her skin marked by lines of stress and time. She was a far cry from the woman who had walked out of his life all those years ago. But those eyes, those same green eyes that had once captured his heart, now looked up at him, pleading silently for something he wasn't sure he could give. "Emile," Marguerite began, her voice shaky, "I know this is unexpected, but I need your help." For a moment, Emile just stood there, frozen. It was as though time itself had stopped, and he was thrust back 10 years to that fateful day when everything had fallen apart. He could still hear the echoes of her final words before she left. "I can't do this anymore. I need to find myself. I need to be happy." Marguerite had left him for another man, a decision that had blindsided Emile. One day, they had been a family, and the next, she was gone. It was a betrayal that had cut deeper than any wound Emile had ever known. And now, after all this time, she was standing at his doorstep, with another man's child, no less, asking for something. But what? Forgiveness? Redemption? Emile felt a surge of emotions rising in his chest. Anger, confusion, disbelief. "I made a mistake," Marguerite continued, her voice cracking. She glanced down at the little girl by her side, her hand gripping the child's tighter. "I left because I thought I needed something else, but I was wrong. I see that now. I've been through a lot, Emile. The man I left you for, he's gone. He left me. And now, I don't have anywhere else to go." Emile blinked, trying to process the weight of her words. The sheer audacity of her showing up like this, after 10 years, after all the hurt she had caused, was almost laughable. He clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the woman who had once been his world. But now she was nothing more than a ghost from a past he had worked so hard to bury. "You made your choice," Emile said coldly, his voice hard and unyielding. "You walked out on us, on Louis, and now what? You think you can just waltz back in like nothing happened?" Marguerite flinched at his words, her face paling. I know I hurt you. I hurt Louis. But I want to make things right. I want to be a family again. I miss him. I miss you." Emile felt his heart twist at the mention of Louis. Their son, who had been only 8 years old when Marguerite left, had been devastated by her departure. He had cried for days, weeks even, asking why his mother didn't love him enough to stay. And now, after all those years of trying to fill that void, of trying to be both father and mother to his son, Marguerite had the nerve to show up and ask to be a part of their lives again? The little girl by Marguerite's side tugged at her sleeve, her eyes wide and confused. "Mommy, who is he?" she whispered. Emil's gaze dropped to the child. She had curly brown hair and freckles dotting her cheeks. Clearly, she wasn't his daughter. Another man's child brought into his life without warning or consent. The thought made his stomach churn. "This is Elise," Marguerite said softly, her eyes flickering with guilt. "She's my daughter, from my previous relationship." Previous relationship, Emil thought bitterly. "The same relationship you left me for?" His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. It was all too much. The memories of their shattered marriage, the sleepless nights, the loneliness. It all came flooding back in a rush of emotion. He had spent years building a new life for himself and Louis. Years of therapy, of trying to make peace with what had happened. And now, in the blink of an eye, Marguerite was back, threatening to tear it all apart again. "No," Emil said, his voice low but firm. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up out of the blue and ask to be part of our lives again. You made your choice, Marguerite. You chose him over us." Marguerite's eyes filled with tears, and she took a step forward, her hand reaching out as if to touch him. "Please, Emil. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. I see that now. I want to fix things. I want us to be a family again. For Elise." For Louis, Emil stepped back, his body rigid with anger. "Louis doesn't need you," he spat. "He's grown up. He's in college now, and I was there for him every step of the way. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who raised him." Tears streamed down Marguerite's face as she listened to his words. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you, Emil, for the sake of our son, for the sake of Elise, who doesn't have anyone else. Please." For a moment, Emil hesitated. He looked at the little girl, who was watching the exchange with wide, innocent eyes. She didn't ask for this. She didn't ask to be caught in the middle of her mother's mistakes. But even as pity flickered in his heart, the overwhelming anger and betrayal he felt wouldn't let him give in. "No," Emil said finally, his voice steely. "You lost your chance. You lost your family. You need to live with that." And with that, he slammed the door in her face. Emil stood behind the closed door, his hands trembling. He leaned against the frame, the weight of the encounter pressing heavily on his chest. Outside, he could still hear Marguerite's muffled sobs as she stood there, probably hoping he would open the door again. But he wouldn't. He couldn't. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, memories of the life they once shared flashing before his eyes. They had been so happy, or at least he thought they had been. Marguerite had always been full of life, adventurous and free-spirited. She had been the kind of woman who couldn't sit still, always chasing the next big thing, always seeking excitement. But Emil, he had been content with the simple things. A steady job, a loving home, their son. For a while, that balance worked. They complemented each other in ways that made their relationship feel right. But somewhere along the way, Marguerite's hunger for more had driven a wedge between them. She had grown restless, distant. Emil had noticed it, but he hadn't known how to fix it. And then, one day she was gone. Gone to pursue what she thought would make her happy. But now, 10 years later, she was back. And she expected him to welcome her with open arms? To pretend as if the past decade had never happened? It was absurd. A sudden knock at the door startled Emil from his thoughts. He hesitated for a moment, thinking it might be Marguerite again. But when he opened the door, he found his neighbor, René Bouchard, standing there with a concerned expression. "Everything all right, Emil?" René asked, glancing toward the street where Marguerite had already disappeared from view. "Saw someone at your door? Seemed a bit tense?" Emile forced a tight smile. "Yeah, just an old ghost," Renee Chuck led, though there was a note of understanding in his eyes. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me." After Renee left, Emile finally allowed himself to breathe. He sank into the armchair by the window, staring out at the street. The encounter with Marguerite had dredged up emotions he thought he'd buried long ago. He had moved on, or at least he thought he had. But seeing her again, hearing her voice, it had all come rushing back. What did she expect? Did she think time had healed everything, that he would simply forgive her and take her back? He couldn't. Not after everything she had put him and Louis through. Louis. Emile's heart clenched at the thought of his son. Louis had been so young when Marguerite left, barely old enough to understand what was happening. He had cried for days, asking why his mother didn't love him enough to stay. Emile had tried his best to fill that void, but he knew it had left scars. Scars that Louis carried even now. What would Louis say if he knew his mother had shown up today? Would he want to see her? Or would he feel the same anger and betrayal Emile felt? Emile wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. He couldn't let Marguerite waltz back into their lives and disrupt everything they had worked so hard to rebuild. It was a late Sunday afternoon when Louis returned home for the weekend. He had called Emile earlier in the week, saying he needed a break from the pressures of university life and wanted to spend some time with his father. As Emile stood in the kitchen preparing dinner, he heard the familiar sound of the front door creaking open. "Dad, I'm home," Louis called out, his voice filled with the same boyish enthusiasm he had always carried, despite being on the cusp of adulthood. Emile smiled to himself, the tension from the previous day easing slightly. "In the kitchen," he replied, stirring a pot of stew on the stove. Louis, now 18 and standing taller than his father, walked into the kitchen with a grin on his face. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and he had a worn-out look that spoke of late-night study sessions and long days in the lecture halls. "Smells amazing," Louis said as he grabbed a spoon and dipped it into the stew for a taste. "Hey, wait for dinner," Emile laughed, swatting his son's hand away playfully. "It'll be ready in a bit." Louis leaned against the counter, his expression softening as he looked at his father. "It's good to be home," he said quietly. "I've missed this." Emile's heart warmed at his son's words. Despite everything that had happened, despite all the struggles they had faced over the years, they had built something strong together, a bond that no one, not even Marguerite, could break. As they sat down to dinner, Emile couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to tell Louis about Marguerite's visit. But how? How could he bring up something so painful, something that had the potential to reopen old wounds? After a few moments of silence, Emile finally spoke. "Louis, there's something I need to tell you." Louis looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed in concern. "What is it, Dad?" Emile took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Your mother. She showed up yesterday." Louis's fork clattered to the table as he stared at his father in shock. "What? Mom? Here?" Emile nodded, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "She came to the house. She's got another child, a little girl. She wanted to talk, to be a family again." For a moment, Louis was silent, his face a mask of disbelief. Then, slowly, anger began to seep into his features. "She thinks she can just come back? After all this time? After everything she did?" Emile nodded, his heart heavy. "That's what I told her. I told her she lost her chance." Louis clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he fought to control his emotions. "She doesn't get to do that," he said quietly, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "She doesn't get to just walk back into our lives like nothing happened." Emile reached across the table, placing a hand on his son's. I know, Louis, and I'm not letting her. I slammed the door in her face. Louis looked at his father, his eyes filled with gratitude and pain. Thank you, Dad, he said softly, for always being there, for never giving up on me. Emile smiled, his heart swelling with pride. You're my son, Louis. I'll always be here for you. Always. The days passed, and the memory of Marguerite's visit began to fade. Life returned to its usual rhythm, with Louis coming home on weekends and Emile continuing his quiet routine. But the encounter had left a lasting impact on Emile, a reminder of the pain they had endured and the strength they had found in each other. One evening, as Emile sat by the fireplace, a knock came at the door once again. His heart skipped a beat, but this time, when he opened it, there was no one there. Just the soft whisper of the wind and the distant hum of the city. A small envelope lay on the doorstep, with his name scrawled in familiar handwriting. He picked it up, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message from Marguerite. Emile, I'm sorry. I truly am. I understand now that I can never undo what I've done, and I can never be the family you and Louis deserve. I hope one day you can forgive me. But I won't ask for it. I'll be moving away with Elise, starting a new life elsewhere. I wish you and Louis nothing but happiness. Marguerite. Emile stood there for a moment, staring at the letter. He felt no anger, no bitterness, just a sense of closure. He folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket, then turned and closed the door behind him. As he sat down by the fire once more, a feeling of peace settled over him. Life would go on, and so would they. Thank you for watching this emotional journey. Do you think Emile made the right choice by shutting the door on Marguerite? Would you have done the same? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one.